Sam Messman has worked for Apple, ESPN, Glee, and Break.com, to name a few. And he's now one of the people behind FCPWORKS, a workflow training and pro video solutions provider built around Final Cut 10 and the Apple ecosystem. He's also a regular writer at FCP.co. You Final Cut people, you know about FCP.co, right? Okay, because it's got super resources. And Sam is part of that. And MovieMaker Magazine. He teaches post workflow at REDucation classes and is the founder and CEO of We Make Movies, a film collective in Los Angeles and Toronto which is dedicated to making the movie industry not suck. Okay, you got that? If you've got any FCP, Final Cut Pro that is, 10 questions or need some help putting the system together, Sam's the man. Sam Messman.
I've got a little bit of a new piece of gear to show you. If you notice that there's no computer on the table, right? Just a real quick show of hands, how many people have used the new Mac Pro at this point? Anybody here have a new Mac Pro? All right. Well, this may be interesting to you then, for those of you who are curious, because what I have in here is basically touches on a concept that Michael was touching on, which is mobility. And for me, what mobility means is being able to get post and production talking and more integrated. Has anyone had a problem or ever heard the saying, fix it in post in production? Has that ever happened to anybody here? Yeah, it seems, yeah, pretty much everyone, right? This happens routinely. Wouldn't it be nice if you could prove them wrong on set? So anyway, currently in the world, most people are working from large carts that are very difficult to set up and hard to move around and difficult to ship if you're going on location somewhere. But what I have in here is a new product. This is actually a prototype version, but the first few are coming off the shelf. I believe next week the first 5 are going into production, and from there you all will be able to get one if anyone has any interest. But it is called the DIT, or it's called the Rogue Pro, from a company called DIT Station, which I think is at this point inappropriately named, because I think the DIT position needs to move from being called the DIT to being on-set post, because I think that's where the world is moving a little bit. And I'll just go ahead and plug this in real quick, and then I'll kind of show you why this might be kind of cool. So we'll just go ahead and plug this in. Now, typically, has anyone here set up a DIT cart before? How long does it normally take you guys? Huh? Okay, so you may understand this then a little bit, what I'm going to show you here. So let's go ahead and get this plugged in. And notice one power cable. Okay, we're plugged in. And let's come and take a look real quick here on what we're looking at on this side. On the top level, can you guys see everything here? So on the top level, we have a, it looks basically just like a computer, like a big wonky computer, right? But if I open this up, we have a keyboard and trackpad. Built in here, we have red mags. However, as part of the configuration, you can literally have any kind of reader, etc. that comes in. So basically, if anyone has any interest, come talk to me. That we can have any kind of reader you want built in. S/S, Alexa, Sony, doesn't matter. They all can get worked right in here, so you can plug in and be able to offload. But the really interesting thing here, actually, is inside we have the new Mac Pro. So basically, a big complaint about the Mac Pro was, well, it's not modular. I can't put PCI slots in there. I can't do this, that, and the other thing. It's not what I need it to be. Well, what this product does is it takes the form factor of the new Mac Pro, which everyone really likes, and it places it in a box where you can literally do anything you want with it, pretty much, that I can think of. Maybe there aren't things that you can't do, but I can't think of many. And what you have here, there's a 3 and a 6 slot PCI model, which is over here. So what you can basically do with this is you could build, if you wanted to, for instance, a 24 terabyte RAID using those PCI slots. And then, on top of it, there's 3 more PCI slots if you come in under here, where you can have a Blackmagic card out, etc. And you can run Video Village. So what this really means is that with one plug, you can essentially have a completely portable edit station that you can bring on set. And when you think about that, and you think about why you might want to do that, let's go ahead and fire this up here. Basically, there are some really good reasons why, which is, at the end of the day, why does editing have to happen later in the process? Why do we, oh, and actually, I probably should plug in, there's one other connection here. Come down here. On the back here, while we're looking, there is a display port, headphone jack, Ethernet plugged in right back here, as well as HDMI, which I'll put on in a minute. And let me just go ahead and make sure these are all in. And let's go ahead and actually fire this guy up again real quick. And hold on one second. Okay, so the fundamental idea here is that post should be moving on set, and being able to set up a system where you don't need a team of scientists to come in and build this giant rack where you can acquire footage and copy it over and do all these things and structure your dailies. So for instance, the person who set up a DIT cart in the back, this was a slightly quicker process, right? Yeah. So, you know, and it's that sort of idea, this idea of mobility that Michael Cioni was talking about a minute ago is hugely important, and being able to be flexible and being able to take some of these high-end technologies, 4K, 6K workflow is all great. But the question is, can you move and do what you need to do with it? And basically with the new Mac Pro and things like the DIT stations and things I'm going to show you in a minute, you can. Now, a quick question for you, because I'm going to be diving into this today, and I'm just curious, how many of you guys out there have heard of Final Cut Pro X or 10? Or how many people out there have heard maybe not the best things about it? Really? That's shocking. I can't believe that. I haven't heard a single negative thing. In fact, and how many people have heard that Final Cut 10 is maybe not the most professional piece of software? Weird. How many people agree with that statement? All right, we still got a few. Brave, good, because you know that I'm going to disagree with you. But I think that's good. I think you should be honest, and I think like the best thing is feel free to ask questions, say I'm wrong, say all of these things, because I'm used to that. And oh, did we get the, was that the HDMI in there? Oh, there we are. Look at this. So before I dive into Final Cut 10, what I'm going to show you real quick is a little something about the new Mac Pro that you guys may find cool. So what I have here, I have a 6K Dragon timeline, right? Does anyone here use the Dragon at all? Anyone here use Red footage? Has anyone been able to successfully play back Red footage without a Red rocket? And has anyone been able to play back Red footage in 6K without a Red rocket? Okay, well what we're looking at here is a 6K timeline in Red Cine X. And with the new Mac Pro, I'm now playing back 6K Red footage at full debear with no red rocket installed. And so if you think about this and how this applies, the gear is there. The technology is now there. So what you probably really need to start thinking about is how you want to work, right? Because you can pretty much do anything you want now. And when you can play back 6K in an app, and currently you can only do that in Red Cine X and Resolve at the moment, but that won't be long, because basically those are the only two programs that have added the Red dual GPU support for the Mac Pro, but right now the limits are off. You know, you can do pretty much anything you want. So this leads me to my real question here, which is, what is the purpose of what we do as editors and people in post? What is the only thing that actually matters? Okay. How many people here feel like they get to spend most of their editing time on the story? I feel like there's something wrong with that, right? Because at the end of the day, when you go and you edit something, no one cares how hard it was. No one cares how many different codecs you used, how many different frame rates, how many different resolutions. They don't care about any of this stuff. They want to sit down and watch a good movie and not be bothered by it, and not be bothered by any of the technical stuff. And I feel like at the end of the day, our goal as editors is to make the most interesting story for the audience, because those are the only people that matter, really, at the end of the day. Because if you can't make an audience happy, then you can't work, because no one's going to watch your stuff. And the purpose of making the stuff is that people watch it. So why are we always so focused on all of these other things, right? Shouldn't the purpose be to get these other things out of the way so we can do our jobs, right? So, you know, it's actually, this was not necessarily planned to come and talk about this, but I was sitting and I was watching Michael, who I think is brilliant and is actually, you should be paying attention to everything out there, because I think it's going to help the technology get out of the way to really understand what he was talking about. But one of the things, people look at me like I'm crazy because I advocate using Final Cut 10 in a professional environment, and I call myself a professional. And I use it professionally. And anyone have a quick definition of what professional is? Okay, I get paid to use Final Cut 10. Okay, right? Professional. So, and I start asking myself, well, am I crazy? And why am I seeing something in this that I feel like a lot of other people are not seeing? And I guess really what it comes down to is I failed the other way, So I'm an independent filmmaker first. That is the first thing that, I want to make my own content. And we made an independent feature a few years ago, and, there used to be a rule book or something or there was this book, actually, which I thought was hilarious because it gave you all the different tips on how to go and assemble and make your own independent feature film, and they had interviews with all of the people from the different departments. And the funny thing about it was that from every department, they would say you need $10,000, $20,000 to do this, and you need $50,000 to do that, and you need $100,000 to do that, do anything professional. So by the time you got through the book, if you followed the whole book, you would actually be making a studio film. So how is that helpful? That's not an independent filmmaking book, right? So the real question is, what that kind of taught me is, as I was going through that, I'm like, well, you clearly need to go and find another way, because the people who are telling you how to do this really aren't seeing your pain. And so we went out and we made an independent feature, and we did all of these things. We were one of the first indies to use the Red camera on Build 15 way back when, and we shot 4K and finished and did all this, and it was fine and it worked, and we went through this whole process, and it was this giant technical process, and every step of the way there were these roadblocks and hurdles, and it takes months and months of editing because you have to take other jobs while you're doing it and all these other things. Then you get to the end, and then you run into the distribution buzzsaw, and it is a very difficult thing to make an independent film. And at the end of the day, we made, I think, what was a really solid film, but we weren't able to deliver to our investors back the money that they had put in. Has anyone else had that problem? Some people quietly smile, I notice, but didn't raise their hands. It happened to me, okay? So the real thing that I learned after that experience was, A, I'm never putting myself in that position again, where I take other people's money and I have to go make something and I'm going to go and follow the rules, get a casting director, get all of these different things and do this, that, and the other thing and do it by the book, because the book is kind of rigged in a sense if you're going to go outside the system. And because of that, I was sort of forced, well, I still wanted to make content and I still wanted to do these other things, but I didn't have any money left and I couldn't actually with a straight face go and ask anyone for more money to do something. So what did I have to do instead? I had like a couple $100. I was in debt, so I rented out a theater and we just started reading scripts, a few of us in Los Angeles. And we just kept doing it. And a few years later, I now run a film collective called We Make Movies, which has 4,000 to 5,000 members. We've had more than 70 films that have been developed directly within our workshop, 70 short films, multiple web series. We have 2 regular shows where we have high-profile corporate sponsors, and we've had 6 features that have been organically developed out there. But also what this has done is, in this process, that has been my lab to basically develop the workflow and the tools that I use. So I've, in many cases, been sort of working on my own to go and develop new things and the way that I want to work and the things that work for me, and then you release it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you gradually refine your approach. And the thing that kind of has struck me recently now with between the world of metadata and the world and where technology has now hit is we are now at a point where all of the tools are there, where there are absolutely no excuses for you not to go and make the content that you want to see at a reasonable budget. And the reason that I gravitate towards Final Cut 10 is because at the end of the day, I'm able, and I'll show you this in a minute, to just sit down and start editing. So any of the stuff you see here today, this is how I work. This is what I do. And so if you look at me like I'm crazy, just so you know, I do this every day. And with that in mind, let's go and start talking about why I do it this way. So this is called spending more time on your story, because if you have a limited amount of resources, you don't have time to go mess around with all of these other technical things because you need to work for a living. So in a typical film workflow these days, which Michael also did a great job of touching on, you will often have a DIT cart on set, and feel free to raise your hand if you disagree with anything I'm talking about here, where you're going to copy to a drive or multiple drives. You might transcode at a lab, which is actually really a Daly's facility now. Their labs don't really exist at this point. Or you're going to transcode overnight from home, then you're going to sync, then you're going to rename your clips, you're going to organize them out into bins, and you're going to create a string out, or somebody's going to create a string out for you. And then also, as Michael really touched on very well, someone's going to come and hand you a binder, or you're going to have a binder, and they're going to hand you some pages that you're going to stick in the binder, and you're going to look at those, and you're like, what am I ever going to use those for? And sometimes you do use them, but you're also like, why do I have to take my eyes off the screen to go look in this binder of the information that happened on set? Wouldn't it be much better if I could work from that information right within my application and really take advantage of it? Because the script supervisor is the eyes and ears for everything that are happening, and with a little communication, the editor should be ahead of the game when they get those copies of the script notes back and some of these other things. And currently, in current workflows, they're not, because there's this repetitive process, as Michael talked about, when you're getting all of this metadata and information on what happened to set back to post. So post at the end of all of this can be up to 3 days behind before you even really know what you have and you're able to sit down and start working on a scene. For me, that's not particularly efficient. Because the thing is, once you get that stuff, you still can't even find anything. So when you start editing, you have in most NLEs, you have a traditional approach of, I'm going to set an in point and an out point. I've got to watch down all of this footage. I've got to figure out what's what. I've got to understand what's happening. I don't know who the characters are in a shot unless I go and refer to the binder. And even on top of that, as you get deeper into the edit, you're like, what take was that? What was that? What was that thing that I really liked? Why can't I find it? And if you're doing documentaries, forget about it. Like, no human being can actually watch and memorize, or I certainly can watch and memorize that much footage if you're dealing with 100 to 200 hours of footage, or God knows how much. And we live in a world now where because it's so much easier to acquire content. And does anyone feel like on the projects that they're working on, that more footage is now coming back to post than it used to? And do people feel well equipped to handle that new volume of footage that's coming back? So what typically ends up happening, right? You've got a needle in the haystack that you're looking for, or the director's like, I think we shot that thing, you know? And you're like, what thing? And then you're like, yeah, I think I saw that somewhere. What was that from? And like, there's no good way to find anything. You know, you have your in and out, you have your single in and out in a clip, and there's no real good way to search. So in Final Cut 10, you know, has anyone here used Google or Yahoo search on the internet? Okay, I'm guessing by your laughter that this is common sense and common knowledge. Has anyone used a spreadsheet? Excel, Google Docs, numbers, and it kind of doesn't matter, right? They're all basically the same concept. No one is like, this is alien, foreign stuff that I don't know how to do. So, does anyone use those within their NLE? And by NLE, I mean edit software. Can anyone give me a good reason why not? So you'd have to manually enter the stuff, right? You'd have to build a spreadsheet, and you'd have to build a database. So the idea with Final Cut is that you're going to take these two existing technologies, search and spreadsheets, and you are now going to be able to manage your footage in the way that you might manage it on the internet. And it's a much better way of thinking about it, because as opposed to it being some foreign concept in terms of editing, it actually is like, no, we do this every other day except in the industry that we work in. So using these technologies, right, these new groundbreaking, earth-shattering technologies, what if you could do everything I showed you on that last slide in 10 minutes that used to take 3 days? Would that be anything anyone has any interest in? Okay then. So you guys would theoretically be interested in seeing a demo where I could take actual feature film footage from an actual feature film, and I could have it completely synced with completely searchable script supervisors metadata within 10 minutes and properly renamed. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and do that? So, basically, let's close out a Red Cine X here. I'm going to open up this little Fisher-Price toy of edit software here, and called Final Cut Pro 10. And this unprofessional piece of software is going to allow us to do this. And in terms of terminology I'm going to use here in a second, is anyone thrown off by the terminology in Final Cut with events, libraries, and projects? So before I dig into this, I'm going to quickly explain it, right? And is everyone familiar with the Final Cut 7 terminology of projects, bins, and sequences? Okay, so here's the best way to translate this, because I know it can be a little frustrating, is your Final Cut project from Final Cut 7 is now your Final Cut Pro 10 library. Your bin in Final Cut Pro 7 is now your event. So this guy is your event in Final Cut 10. And within that, your project in Final Cut 10 is a sequence in Final Cut 7. So this is a project, but it's actually your sequence. Does that kind of clear things up a little bit? And from there, so it's really the same exact concept with slightly different terminology. And hopefully that's going to help you get through kind of the rest of what I'm going to show you here. And anyway, as promised, if we come out here, and I'm just going to stretch this out, and I'm dealing with a little bit of a resolution issue here, so I can't quite show you as much as I'd like to be able to, but we're going to bring some of this in over here. Basically, what we've got here is an entire day's worth of multi-camera footage from an actual feature film. And if you notice, there's really nothing in the metadata fields here. I have nothing in my scene, shot, take, or camera angle here. And everything's basically renamed to the original camera files, right? But it's all been imported, and it's all 4K original R3Ds, which, by the way, is a kind of a cool little feature in Final Cut where it's not really a big deal to play back red footage in Final Cut either. Not a ton of people know that, but it works very similar to the way Premiere handles R3D footage. So using a couple of third-party applications, one from Intelligent Assistance and the other from Copto Studios, I'm going to be able to turn this footage into a completely renamed and synced project or event or library, depending on how you want to look at it. And it's a very simple process, and we're going to use XML, which is something that you had in Final Cut 7 days and is also, I think, a more robust version now with the new version of Final Cut. And basically, I just exported an XML of this event here, which is in my library, and I'm going to put it into my Shot Notes XML folder, and I'm just going to save the XML, which is pretty much just a log of the clips that were in there. And I'm going to open up a program from Intelligent Assistance called Sync and Link 10. And I'm going to open the XML, this XML I just exported. We're going to open it up. And the way Sync and Link works is it's going to take clips with that were synced with timecode and second source audio, and they're going to match it according to timecode, so that it's going to create in Final Cut 10 new clips that have connected audio. So you're still working with your camera originals, but it's literally going to take the sound file and it's going to merge it into a wrapper, basically. So they're going to be wrapped together, so you're still only using with your camera original files. And it's going to send it back in, and I'll show you how this works now. And basically, you're going to sync the clips, and it's found that, and we're going to go to save the XML file. And it's also going to automatically, if you want, just have it come back directly into Final Cut. So you'll notice here that I now have a new event, and it's called Shot Notes Synced. And if I click on one of these clips, and it'll show you whether these are keyword collections. Does everybody kind of know what a keyword is? Basically, it's like a tag, right? It's like an internet tag. So look at keywords as like tags. And so what Sync and Link does is it'll tell you whether you have synced, not synced, or a couple of different tag styles based on that. So let's go into the sync clips, and if I go here and I go into my inspector in the audio tab, you'll notice that I now have connected audio here. And even more interesting is that, if your sound engineer or sound recordist is recording character types and all of that stuff, those labeled tracks are going to come across automatically. So if you notice, the sound recordist here, there's only 4 channels of audio. This is labeled channel 5 because he mislabeled that one. And that's going to come across. So you could have these labeled, if you coordinated with your sound person, you could have your individual audio channels labeled according to character or microphone type or anything you wanted to do. So it's like another level of functionality. But the key thing here is that, as you can see, I now have a fully synced project that I can play back directly from my original files, And if I control click and I open this clip in its own timeline, you'll see that it's just connected the audio directly to the original R3D clip. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anyone have questions on that? Okay. Yes. Well, actually, I don't know if we have audio out. If you're curious, you can come take a look after, and you'll be able to hear it through the speakers here. But so Final Cut actually has its own kind of pluralize built in. So, basically I can take two clips, and I'll show you if I get to the multicam demo a little bit, it can sync according to waveform in the same way that pluralize does, and you can do this directly within the app and automatically sync your footage as long as you shoot in camera audio. And this Okay, you're going to like this demo later then, because there's a whole other thing I'm going to show you too. And the answer is no. So if you record in-camera sound, you don't need it. In this scenario, if you want to sync a group of clips all at once and you've recorded timecode, you can batch sync everything, and that's what Sync and Link does. But we still have the problem of, I would have to look at the slate on one of these clips to know what it was. So this would mean I would have to rename all of these somehow, because I don't have any of that metadata in here, right? And this is where your script supervisor, with a little communication beforehand, can become your new best friend. So let's go now and kind of step back into the Finder here. And if we go into, does everybody know what a CSV file is? Basically, a CSV file is like a tabbed file that's similar to what you'd see in a spreadsheet, but it's kind of a universal tabbed file. And if I open this up, this is a tabbed file based on Final Cut Pro clip name, scene, take, note, keywords, camera angle, clip duration, all that stuff. And basically, if you had your script supervisor going through and recording some of this metadata while they were on set and filling this out along the way, you could, we'll give this, we'll keep it here for now. We could, when we come back, I'll show you guys some of this. But you would be able to, wouldn't it be nice to be able to merge some of this over XML, so this would all be able to automatically come into a project? So I'm going to take this group of synced audio clips that I just made in Sync and Link, and there is a new application that I actually helped develop called Shot Notes. And the reason we developed this is because, on a feature film that we were working on, the editors were literally copying and pasting this metadata in. And we're like, there has to be a better way to do this. And this is what we came up with. And so basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this XML that we just made, or actually that Sync and Link just made. And sorry, I am not the best with the trackpad. And I'm just going to drag it into the Shot Notes well here. And I'm going to take this CSV that you can make there's currently a film shooting right now with this exact workflow, and basically on set they're using a Google Doc. And they're entering in all this metadata over a Google Doc. The editor, or DIT, has access to that Google Doc, and they're going to export a CSV file, which is basically this file. And this will also work in iCloud's version of Numbers as well. And they are taking, actually I dragged the CSV in first. I want to take this XML that I dragged in here. And we're going to drag this in. And now you'll notice that 43 clips were found with 43 notes, right? So all I need to do is drag these two files, and it's going to create a new XML, which is -altered. And I'm going to select the library I want it to go into, and it's going to have the exact same process, except that now I have all of this extra metadata, right? So if I click on this clip, or on scene 90, for instance, on this keyword, all of the clips from scene 90, because I was going through applying keywords to them, will now show up automatically. And the clips have automatically been renamed based on scene and take. However, if I want, I can even go in here and select all of my clips and come into the info section. And Final Cut has a really cool feature called Apply Custom Name, which I'll show you a little bit more in the Multicam demo in a minute. And if I hit that, it's now going to rename according to metadata columns based on scene, take, and angle. So now I have a fully synced, renamed event, and I can essentially get started editing. And if I wasn't talking so much, this could have happened minutes ago. But even more interesting, right, is if we scroll through here, you'll notice that in my notes field, and I have all of these notes that were applied here, right? And this is where things can start getting really interesting. So if you notice, it's based on shot type, and then the characters are in here as well, right? So what if I wanted to see all of my over-the-shoulder shots? I can just type in OTS here, right? And all the different things that have come up with the code are immediately going to become searchable. But what if I want to take that an extra step further? And I'm going to add another text filter. And I want to see all of the OTS or over-the-shoulder shots with the sheriff in them. And now I filtered those down. And now, what if I wanted to take that even further? And we're going to uncheck all. And I want to see all of the over-the-shoulder shots with the sheriff from scene 90. Now I'm down to 3 clips. So this way of filtering and this way of using this metadata can be extremely effective in terms of getting down and getting going editing. So what we've essentially done in the last 10 minutes is build a project. So based on this, right, and we come back to the original point with the DIT station, is that this can be happening on set. So if you're doing a commercial, for instance, or you're doing some of these other things, there's absolutely no reason that you not only couldn't send a properly prepped event or library back to post at the end of the day for them to begin working on, but you could even start cutting and seeing if you're missing things on set. And this adds a whole additional level of functionality that you would be able to do. And it's really not that hard. All you need to do is tell the script supervisor what kind of things that you want him or her to be documenting, and so you can search for them later. So if you plan ahead and you know how you want to work, you can have all of that information come in immediately. Does that make sense to anyone? Does anyone have any questions on that? Cool. All right. Yeah. Sorry, I can't see. The CSV file originated in numbers in this case. So basically, and actually, if you go, you can generate one directly from shot notes. So I can make a template log, and we'll just put it in here for now. And basically, it's going to make a template automatically that your script supervisor can start working from. So you don't need to make your own template. Basically, you give them this that's automatically generated. They fill in the columns as you go. They export a CSV. And if they've gotten the clip names correct, you don't need to do anything else. But worst case scenario, you might have to do a copy-paste operation to take what the script supervisor sent to a shot log. And I can show you this, that if I go to XML in here, and I bring in this synced XML, you can generate a template from your footage after you've imported it in there. So I can save the shot log from the XML, and it's going to make a new template based on all of the stuff that was already present. So what this also means is that, so you might copy and paste what the script supervisor sent, because this is already 100% accurate, and you just paste the columns you need over. Not only that, but if there's an error, you can go and modify it and bring it back in. Or you can add new metadata if you need to. So you can use a spreadsheet, because it's much quicker to work in a spreadsheet than it is necessarily to go and enter this, even though Final Cut has really good tools for it. The ability to go and move your metadata out, fix what you need to fix, and send it back in is a really straightforward process. Does that kind of answer your question?
Partially, I just wanted to be clear that it sounds like you're not eliminating the logging process.
No.
You're just logging into the CSV, which is in a format where it can be easily married and that what's the...
No, you're not eliminating the logging process at all, but where you are eliminating it from is post. So,
right, you're moving it out to set.
So essentially, this would be happening on set so that when it comes back to post, and it's also being placed in the hands of the person tasked with actually recording all this information anyway, because the script supervisor is doing this anyway. So why not just have them do it in a way that's accessible to the editor?
And the software, what's the name of the software you helped create?
Shot Notes 10.
And so that CSV format that you showed us, that template, is made in such a way to match the Final Cut 10 XML file.
Exactly.
So that that automatic relabeling happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to be clear.
So basically, those columns match up with a over XML to a Final Cut 10 metadata column. So basically, it's just reading the different things and sending it to the correct place so that the app reads it. And it's just happening kind of in the background through XML.
Okay.
So yeah, but that's basically the process, and it's a really kind of simple, straightforward tool that will allow you to do this for very little money. Shot Notes 10 costs $50, and the amount of time that it saves you is kind of enormous. And so basically, that is the fundamental concept of being able to get down and get to your story significantly faster. And from there, once you get into your story, well, then the question often comes up, well, what does my assistant editor do now, right? And for me, the idea is that your assistant editor can now take advantage of some of these additional tools in Final Cut 10 that I'm going to show you, where they can be serving the editor far more than just going and relabeling all the stuff that happened on set to get something that's prepped to edit. Instead, what your assistant editor could be doing is going through and making custom string outs. So if we go in here, right, a couple things that may be interesting to you. Say you didn't want to see any of your slate. So there's our slate there. I'm going to set an out here, and I'm going to hit delete. So you notice there's a rejected range that came up. And if I set this to hide rejected, that range is now gone. So I can have multiple selections within an edit that I can be deleting out of, but they're automatically, and this all happens through metadata, they automatically come back if I hit all clips. So, and on top of that, you can go and you can select a range and you can say this was a really great performance, or this was a really good line in documentary style. I mean, the rejections are actually very useful in a documentary workflow because basically, in many cases, people that are shooting documentaries will shoot these gigantic takes, and there's maybe 30 seconds of stuff that's useful. So you can go clean all of that stuff out and just keep the parts that are worthwhile. And then within that, as you would go through, you can go and mark the sections as a favorite and rename those, and we'll call this great, right? And basically, you can go, and there's a couple different ways for you to find your favorites. So you can just go and select Show Me Favorites Only, or if you have a naming system for your favorites, you can type in great. And just those sections that have that, they're completely searchable. So this idea of only having one in and out within a clip and only one thing that you can start seeing, so let's, for instance, actually probably the best thing to do here would be, let's go and make a new project. And we'll call this test. And I'm just going to quickly put another selection around this. So what could your assistant editor be doing is not only making favorite and rejections according to how your editor wants to work, but on top of that, they can be making much smarter string outs. So if I type in great here, actually, I did not rename this. Let me type in great. And if I type in great here, I can actually take this favorite range, and I can select that favorite range, and now I can edit both of those together into the timeline simultaneously. So if you think about the way that you want your string outs created, your assistant editor can be making really smart, prepped things that you can not only find in your event browser, which is this area up here, but you can also start working with immediately in your timeline. And you can create auditions, which I can show you. So for instance, you can set these up this way if you wanted to as well, where you can bring this up here, and I'm going to make an audition. And if I select this clip, I can have different line readings in a string out based on this, and go 2, 3, and go and find the takes that I want. I mean, there's a million different ways to use this and take advantage of it. And it's all just a question of how you want to work. But the possibilities that it opens up and the different things and getting through your projects faster and managing these larger amounts of footage is, I think, really useful. So from there, you asked a question about syncing and how Final Cut syncs. So I'm going to show you something. Does anyone here shoot multicam? All right, so there's a few people who do a lot of multicam work. And what we have here is what by all definitions would be the world's sloppiest organizational hazard in terms of slating and what would typically be a very difficult thing to assemble into a multicam clip. This is an hour-long interview taped with basically 3 DSLRs, and if you guys know about DSLRs, you know about the starting and stopping with them and all of that in larger sections. So there's no slate whatsoever, there's no time code, we're only dealing with in-camera audio, and I'm going to make a single multicam clip out of all of these right now. And there's 3 cameras with second source audio. So, and basically I'm just going to be using metadata, and more specifically I'm going to be using camera metadata, camera angle metadata to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find all the clips from camera 1, and I'm going to call these, I'm going to come over to my inspector, and I'm going to type in cam A. And if you notice, it's added all of the cam A angle metadata here. I'm going to go to my camera B, which I can tell here based on the clip numbers. I'm going to select these. I'm going to call this camera angle cam B. And I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to call this cam C. Oh, thank you. I wasn't paying attention. All right. Cam C. Okay. So, and now as we can see, we have all of those. And what I recommend you do when you do stuff like this is when you label your audio, and I'll show you why in a second, you're going to want to label it, Z underscore audio. Put a Z in front. Because basically what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that it's the last angle in your multicam at all times. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these clips and control click, and I'm going to make a new multicam clip. We're just going to use the standard synchronization, but you can go through and use custom settings and do it however you want. But for this purpose, and I'll show you in a second, we'll call this test. And it's going to use audio synchronization to go and make these multicams. And for the most part, this works very well. It's going to read the waveforms and match everything up and order the clips according to the camera angle metadata that you've set. So let's see how we did in this scenario. For me, it's about 9 out of 10 times that it's accurate. And it'll take a second because it's basically taking 30 different pieces of media and making one single clip out of it. And when I double click this, oh, look at that. We do not have a correct multicam. What's interesting is we have 2 angles that seem to be accurate, but we have 2 others that seem to have aligned in a separate area. But if you notice here, it's taken all of the correct clips based on our camera angle metadata, and it's placed them in their own angle lanes. So does everyone kind of see what's happened here? So basically cam A is angle 1, cam B is angle 2, cam C, so it's placed them alphabetically into angle lanes. But in the event, for the most part, this works extremely well. But in the event that it doesn't, there are some different things that you can do to adjust this. So for instance, I'm going to set my monitoring angle here to cam B. And I want all of these clips to come in sync with cam B. Let's see if that's possible. Well, I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to go sync angle to monitoring angle. And now it's going to synchronize the clips, and like magic, it's going to move them all now into sync because I picked the angle that I wanted to sync with based on the in-camera audio. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. And now I have a completely accurate multicam. So if I come up here and I do Shift-Command-7, you'll see that I now have all of my clips totally in sync. And I just made a multicam using no slate, no time code, out of 30 different pieces of media, even had the automated tools not go well, and still was able to quickly fix it using some of these tools that you can use in Final Cut that just not a lot of people know about. And it's things like this that make your life as an editor a lot easier, because now I can just get down and start editing. And you know, some other things that are interesting about this is if I go, here's some other things on the color correction side, for instance. This workflow is awesome. So I just made a multicam clip here, and actually what I'd probably do is reject that section, but we're going to come and, so I just edited this in the timeline, and I'm just going to quickly make a couple edits across these. And 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So ordinarily, you would theoretically have to color correct each and every one of these clips, right? But in a multicam environment, something that's really interesting is you can color correct directly in your multicam, which means that if I open up color board here and I do some god-awful color correction, looks great, right? And I took this and I simply shift selected all of these other pieces of media, and then I go and I paste attributes and I paste the color correction across all the different clips in this angle. When I come back into my timeline, if you notice, all of my clips have that grade on them now. So you can grade and you can do audio mixing directly within a multicam, and that's going to appear everywhere else that you've cut those clips in your edit, which once again speeds up the process a little bit and lets you focus a little bit more on your edit. And so for me, just being able to spend more time on my story, I'm actually able to deliver a much better product to my clients and customers because I simply have more time to spend on the things that I know that they're going to like, you know, and I have more time with that process, and some of this other stuff can just get out of my way. And if I come, so pretty much the last thing I'll kind of show you, well, 2 more things I'm going to show you. How am I doing on time? I got another 15. I got a half hour? Okay, so we'll leave 15 minutes for Q&A. So Now what I'm going to show you here is, this is the whole reason I got into Final Cut in the first place, is I used to do a lot of red work. And has anyone ever tried to conform a red film in Final Cut 7? Don't. It's not easy. So basically taking a red film and getting that out, that workflow, and getting out to Apple Color and some of those, you had to go through all of these gymnastics to get back to your original R3D files. And you would typically, it was a very difficult process, especially if you'd made a lot of transformations, et cetera, on clips in your edit. So if I take a few of these clips here, so these are all 6K Dragon clips, and I'm going to go and open up this timeline. And we'll hover across. You'll notice, and actually this is a, you know what? I'm going to show you first. We're going to start this from scratch, because this is something for the DCP that I'll show you later. So I'll show you how easy it is, first off, to import your original R3Ds. And then I'll show you some fairly cool things that you can then do with it. And if you're working in a 4K or red workflow, this becomes a very straightforward process. So if we go to Dragon here, I have a group of Dragon clips. They're all in here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to drag them into this new event I made. I'm going to continue the import. And now all of my Dragon footage is here. I can play it back. I'm good to go. I'm good to start editing. However, the deeper you get into your edit, the more, like, the R3D codec is not a, it's not designed for editing. It's basically designed for finishing and using the raw capabilities and some of these other things. So wouldn't it be nice if you could blend an offline and online workflow together, where you can just literally flip back and forth between an editing codec and a high-end, finishing codec, and have this happen seamlessly, and have your entire conform process with all of your transforms, effects, etc., are all going to get processed back to your originals. So we'll go call this Dragon. And so what I'm going to show you is how you can go about doing that. And if I go and shift select these clips here, and I edit them into the timeline, the first thing that's going to come up is resolution. These are 6K Dragon. Now, what is interesting about Final Cut is that it is actually resolution independent. So if I come down and select custom, I'm now going to be working in a 6K timeline that's set according to my source settings, and I'm playing back a 6K timeline now. And from there, if I was to go continue my edit this way, and I'm editing a feature film, gradually I would probably start to see a bit of a performance hiccup as I got deeper and deeper and further into the edit with more and more complex projects. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 3 clips here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to transcode this media to proxy. And as you're going to see in the background, it is flying through this process. So I just transcoded a clip now to ProRes proxy, and what it's doing is it's making a half-res ProRes version of the original 6K R3D. And this is the whole reason why I moved to Final Cut 10 in the first place, is because of this red workflow, which is basically now, if I go and I hit the proxy button, these are still offline. And I can't even tell you how many streams I can do with this off the Mac Pro. But you'll notice these are now offline because I haven't transcoded proxies yet. So more interesting, though, is if I go back to my original R3Ds, and this is something cool, actually. This is the coolest thing. I'm probably not going to get too deep into this, but this is the timeline index. And there are just 9 million things you can do in here. Basically, you can search anything in your timeline that you can search in your event browser. So for instance, if I wanted to search based on keywords that were present, and I don't actually have any keywords on this stuff yet, so, or roles, or I wanted to set, to-do markers or anything like that, this can all happen here through these various different buttons. But here's something else, is you can select multiple clips in a timeline, and now I'm going to go here, and we're just going to do a quick transformation. And I'm just going to rotate these, and we'll come in here, and let's find a ridiculous looking effect. Okay, desert glare. All right. So now, if I go and I'm hovering across, so not only can you group select, and one tip I would make is if you're dealing with multiple different resolutions, put a keyword in for your different resolutions, because then you're going to be able to search based on those. And you can make group transformations if you're switching between aspect ratios. So for instance, if you're going from 4K DCI down to 1080p, it's real easy. Just select all the clips that have the 4K DCI keyword and, you know, change the sizing on them, and you'll be good to go. But you can group select and modify these, and right now I'm working in my originals, but if I flip back and forth, if I flip back to my proxies, notice that all of these effects and transformations have happened there. So I can do all of my, I can rough everything in, get my whole project fully built and assembled, edited, ready to go to online, and then I just want to go back to my originals. I hit the optimize button, optimize original button, and now any transformations, keyframes, effects, anything like that are going to be automatically applied to my original files. So the conform process is dead, and then from there you can go off to resolve. You can go off, and it actually, Final Cut 10 works very well with resolve. It's going to work over XML. It's going to bring in your keyframes, your rotations. I actually did a video at some point if you want to know what kind of does and doesn't come in, but it's very similar to what you'd see with any other NLE. In fact, in some cases, it's a little bit better integrated. And from there, what you might do to finish is, does anybody here had to make a DCP file? A DCP file for cinema projection? Basically, if you want to go play in a theater, they're going to ask you to make something called a DCP file. And oftentimes, you know, until recently, you've had to go to a post house to do this. However, there's a company called Quvis, Q-U-V-I-S, and they make a plug-in for Final Cut 10, or actually for compressor, where I can make a 4K DCP if I wanted to directly within compressor, and all I would need to do would be from Final Cut, and I actually made this project earlier. If I go here, and so this is called Dragon 4K for DCP, right? Notice that I've got the letterboxing on the top and bottom because the aspect ratio is a little bit different. And all I would do would be to export a ProRes 4x4 file, which is right here. And let's go to compressor, and I'm just going to drag this directly in there. I'm going to bring my DCP wrapper on, open up this guy, go to configure, and if I go to, all I would need to set would be, I'm going to set the video to 4K, and it's going to automatically size based on your resolution to what the container is. Go to audio, you can do surround, as many channels as you want, you can even do stereo if you need to, packaging, etc. You're going to click OK, and then basically I'm just going to start the batch, and I'm going to have it go to whatever setting, place I wanted to go to. And I've already made this DCP of this exact file already. So if I come in here, it's going to make a package that looks like this, which is going to have all this different stuff in that you can't really look at. And the other problem that a lot of people have with DCPs is that it's very hard to play them back. There's not a lot of software that can do it. And what Quvis also does is they sell a rental version of a DCP player that if you just need to check something, you know, you can pay $30 for a month, and you have it for a month, and then it goes away, and you don't need it again, and you only rent it when you need it, or you can pay for it for full license for the year. So essentially, all I would do now, if I wanted to play this back, oh boy, is file, oh, okay, well, I don't have internet here at the moment, but what you would do, because it wants an internet connection at the moment, is I would take this file. I don't think this is going to work. Yeah.
If I had internet, it would be able to check my license, and I'd be able to play back a 4K DCP right from my Mac and make sure that the sound and picture all came through correctly. So essentially, what I just kind of showed is a workflow that involves very little money and hardware, where you can essentially go from production all the way through final delivery to the cinema and get it done, you know? And that's the reason for me why I'm using Final Cut 10. And
So, you know, because at the end of the day, I want to spend more time on my story.
so that's all I got, guys. Thanks.
And
Does anybody have any questions?
sure.
Thing is on. Yeah, it's on. So the only thing that kept me away, of course, was the obvious. When Final Cut Pro first came out, it was missing stuff. They've gone through a lot of changes, iterations, fixes. What would you say at this point is missing, essentially? You know, if you're about to work on a feature that you should know, like, okay, it's Achilles heel. Here's a couple of weaknesses. Because obviously, I mean, that's some great stuff. Awesome, very attractive. What are the weaknesses?
Okay, so in terms of what I think the weaknesses are, at the end of the day, pretty much most of the stuff that was missing is now back in. All of the giant things people were complaining about, where's my multicam, all of this other stuff, that's back in. However, I do think there is some room for improvement on, for instance, like you have to get a proper third-party plugin if you want your three-way color back. So you'd need to buy Hawaii Color if you wanted to get your three-way back. You should also know that there is no OMF support. So if you want to get out to Pro Tools, there is a great tutorial I can show you, and you can actually create a great AAF to get out to Pro Tools. But you need a second-hand program called Extra Pro to do that. So that's a third-party third-party application that you would use there. And Michael Garber actually has a fantastic. You can actually using roles, and I didn't get into that here, but it's a little bit of a different way of working. But I think the biggest roadblock that you're going to find as you get in, also if you need to lay off the tape, you're out of luck. Bottom line. That's and I don't see that coming and getting added. You know, that would be my guess is that will not return because I think in a lot of cases tape-based workflows are going to go away. So if you know that you have a tape deliverable or anything along those lines, you're going to need to use another piece of software to get out to that. No way around it. From there, you know, in terms of deal breakers, there aren't many, aside from the fact that it's going to take you some time to really get into the power features the same way that you probably have spent getting into the power features on Final Cut 7 or Avid or Premiere. But in terms of things you can't do anymore, there really aren't many, and I think there's maybe a few things that it could do better. And right now, my opinion would be on the color tools. I'm not a huge fan of the color board, and however, it does work. It's just not my favorite. And on some of the sound tools, I wish the rolls were better. However, and if you need an audio mixer, there's not an audio mixer built in, but there are certain things on the audio side that you can do that you can't really do anywhere else, and all of the logic filters are built in there, which are far better than what used to be in there. And the way that I work with sound, I actually don't miss a lot of the old tools that I used, but I think the biggest thing is getting past the wall of, well, I do things this way, so how come it's not doing what I want it to do, versus, well, I need to do this, maybe there's a way to do this that I hadn't thought of, and figuring out what works and doesn't work for you, because it does work differently.
A couple of things that stood out to me that weren't there, and I don't know if they fixed it, is, one, versions of autosaves, which...
Oh, yeah, that's in. They have that.
That came back. Mm-hmm. And then also not being able to cross-dissolve between two audio clips. Did they fix that?
No, the audio cross-dissolve is not there at the moment. However, you can, there are simple ways to, it's weird. I don't miss the crossfade anymore. I understand why, I mean, obviously people want their tracks and all of that stuff. However, if we step into Final Cut here, and we go, let's go in the show notes. where's the project that I made here? Did I make a project? All right. Let me put this elsewhere. Okay, so if I go and I take a few clips here, and because these should have audio already, right? So if I double click here, right? See this little fade handle? There's that, and then I can immediately change the type of fade right in there. So for me, that's the way that I'm typically working, because I can split apart the audio and I can do whatever I need to do and overlap it. Now, I understand the need for probably a crossfade, but for me, actually, at the end of the day, this does give me a little bit more control than I typically had. So there is a way to do it, just not necessarily that specific way.
Just more steps, basically.
I don't even know if it's that many more steps, because, you know, typically in a, you know, when you're using crossfades, because I come from a Final Cut 7 background, it's like, I would probably still love to see it added, but you would still have to go through, in many cases, a lot of your tracks or alt drag your audio channels up to do some of these things. So it depends on what you're doing, I guess would be my point of view on it.
Actually add a crossfade from the video to the audio. You think crossfade only works from the video, it looks like a video effect, but it actually works across separate audio strips too.
That's what it is working on.
It does.
Yeah, if you put a cross dissolve, actually, it will crossfade the audio. But you can't do it just on 2 audio clips, which is, I think, what he wanted, where you can't put. Although actually you might be able to, believe it or not, if you turn these into a secondary storyline. But there's also the thing where, you know, if I go, you know, I can go right into my component mode. I mean, how deep do you want me to go with the audio stuff? Because there's all kinds of things that you can do here. So like if I do a range tool and then drag down, you know, like there's, I can go across a component and disable the range really quickly and then, you know, drag out that selection. And then I can take a fade handle from that component and do that. So, and I'm working directly within the components, and then, you know, I can go and select the top level clip and, you know, choose to see or not see these. And so it literally, it's just a different workflow. And I guess for me the question would be, and yeah, I think having a crossfade would be nice, but there's also, it's, for me personally, I don't miss it as much as, you know, having it.
FCPWORKS or?
Yes, if you go to FCPWORKS, I have a host of free tutorial videos, and there's a whole bunch of different resources, and there's some videos of me online doing some of this stuff, and then there's within that, and some of them are from previous versions of the software, so there will only be improvements to what I had in those videos. But for instance, that Multicam tutorial that I had, there I have one online for that. All the metadata stuff, there's another video that I did. The red workflow, I go into more detail, into the timeline index, all that stuff.
And do you find, you know, I went from FCP7 to Premiere and had lots of problems going from Premiere to Resolve. So are there anything specifically that you know between X and Resolve?
Yes. So for instance, and actually, well, it's so strange because every month or two, the integration gets better. So basically things, I actually did a Final Cut 10 to Resolve video where at the end I listed all of the different things that do and don't come in. And some of those things have been crossed off the list. So for instance, spatial conform has been crossed off the list. Speed adjustments are an interesting one, which currently, in a lot of cases, you can get the speed adjustments to come into Resolve, but you're going to lose it on the round trip. Now, at the end of the day, what you probably should do is to make your life a little bit easier. You know, even in Final Cut 7, you would occasionally get some of the speed adjustments to come through, but sometimes they would be completely ridiculous when they came back. So, you know, that idea of removing the speed change is probably your best bet, and then reapplying, you know, that speed change later. So you're still going to have a little bit of a conform process going to Resolve, but I think it's better than it was in Final Cut 7. And I haven't done a lot of, I know Premiere's done a lot of work on their XML, so I don't know where it is in relation to that process, but it's certainly not worse.
Thank you.
Can you talk about exporting to APS or ONS?
Yeah, so in terms of
exporting an AAF. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take an XML into Xtapro, and if you work with your roles, and if you drop me an email, by the way, Sam at FCPWORKS, if that's how you guys get in touch with me. And if you have any questions about this stuff, I can point you in the direction. But there's a specific tutorial on how to prep the AAF that Michael Garber did, where the process is you're going to export an XML, you're going to bring it into this program called Xtapro, you're going to slot out your roles, which I don't quite have time to get into at the moment, and that's going to order your tracks that come through in Pro Tools, and it's going to create an AAF based on those, and your sound mixer will be able to get going based on that. So it's very similar to, it'll just make the AAF for you that's going to be imported into Pro Tools. And it works.
Hi. Quick question about the shot notes tool. Have you ever, instead of, the old way of doing it, somebody hands you that binder, that's the needle in the that's the haystack. Have you ever been able to do something where somebody could, like OCR, scan some of that stuff and then bring it into your shot notes tool and then make a CSV out of that data so that then you could bring that tagging in?
Well, yeah, I mean, you theoretically could. Anything, if they were to make a PDF where the text was selectable, sure. Or if they were doing a digital copy where you can select the stuff, you could copy and paste that in to the template and just bring in the stuff that you wanted to do. Or, I mean, really it's the question of how is it's really talking with your script supervisor ahead of time, and generally what I've found is that if you can explain why you need something, like you can figure out a way to get it into their process. By the way, with shot notes, it's going to be very soon where it's going to work with Scripty, so you're going to be able to export the CSV out of Scripty and be able to bring that directly into shot notes. So we're actively, and it will work with Movie Slate. So there's lots of different ways to go about it, and it's really, as long as you can make a CSV out of something, you should be good to go. Well, if you can, please show me, because I don't know. I'd love to see it, because that would be great. That would be, because there's still a lot of people who are doing the handwritten script notes. And being able to do that, to be honest, I'm not familiar, but I think it would be awesome. Yeah, Siri. Yeah, well, maybe.
It's called data entry.
And by the way, actually, if anyone longer term has any interest in more of this workflow, or you're looking for hardware configurations or any of that stuff, believe it or not, actually, our home base is here in New Mexico at Aquila. And if anyone actually needs a Mac Pro, we have a bunch of 8 and 12 cores in stock. So Ian over there is the guy to come talk to if you guys ever need any Apple or Blackmagic or any of that sort of gear, and we'll put together a package based around some of these things.
Ian, raise your hand.
And the difference between us and some of the other places is, it's similar prices to B&H and some of these other places, but we'll answer your tech support questions if you have problems.
This package that you have in here,
Yeah.
this is now for sale, or do you have to do?
So it is now for sale. We are a reseller for DIT Station and the Rogue Pro. So the first 5 are literally coming off the assembly line this week. And if you have any interest, just drop me an email, and then we can talk about what kind of configuration and some of that stuff you might want, and give you pricing. And it's going to be a lot cheaper than a cart. Let me put it like that.
We're trying to talk Sam into leaving this one here for a couple of weeks. 48 hours coming up,
Yeah. Do you know of any feature films right now, Hollywood feature films, that have tried to adopt using Final Cut Pro 10 in their editing, or they're still holding off and just doing Media Composer?
I knew this was going to come. Yes. And there's more coming.
And if I could talk more about it, I would talk more about it.
Where will we find that out and when? I mean, when it comes out, will it be in Variety? Where will it be?
All kinds of places, I
Okay.
guess.
I mean, but the bottom line is it is being adopted
Your
into
blog,
Hollywood
right?
and other places. People are using this workflow. There's a film that's using shot notes right now. And for me, it's not my place to talk about any of the stuff that's going on and where it's happening without them wanting me to do so. But the fact is, it's like it's all bets are off at this point in terms of there's no workflow where no one's using it at this point.
Question over there, John. Hang on, get the mic.
Think Apple will ever get Final Cut Pro into a collaborative editing system?
Oh, you can actually. I mean, you can use it collaboratively. I think the collaboration tools are going to go better. But we at NAB at our suite, we had 8 machines running off of Quantum SAN, with the same libraries opening up, and you can spread those among editors. And there's feature films who are working with it off of SAN as we speak, and it works just fine in the SAN environment.
Okay, last one. Say you're working with a group who prefers Avid, but I mean, I just see the value of this on set. All that metadata, will that transfer over if you were to send over your XMLs to them?
Well, unfortunately, and this is the main problem, it will in Premiere. The main issue with Avid, unfortunately, is they don't accept XML. So, you're dealing with AAF, and then at that point you're dealing with a conversion tool. And it's really my only issue with Avid. Like, I don't care what anyone edits with. You should use the best tool for your job. But for me, my only problem with Avid is, why can't I work with you? Like, why do I have to only live in the Avid world, And it's the same, and that's the major issue, is that it only accepts AAF and it just doesn't play well with others. But if I wanted to get to Smoke, it'd be no problem. If I wanted to get to Nuke, it'd be no problem. If I wanted to get to Premiere or After Effects, you can convert the Final Cut 10 XML to a Final Cut 7 XML and get anywhere you want.
Last question? Last question? One more anywhere? We're actually staying on time. Oh, all right.
From what I've heard, FCP10 is paired with Motion, so you can't use other compositing software with it. Is that true?
No, you definitely can. I mean, it may not be as elegant a round trip as I think the After Effects and Premiere workflow is, which is far more straightforward. But if you have X to 7, you can send an XML right into After Effects. It's not a big deal, and do whatever you needed to do there. So, and getting to Nuke isn't a big deal. Like, it still works with all the same formats. So, you're dealing with the same types of shots. And actually, we're working on some VFX software, honestly, at the moment, to make it easier for VFX people to get some of their shots in and pass shots back and forth. So it definitely will work with After Effects. Motion is actually a great tool that I think for most editors is fantastic, and I didn't have time to cover it today. But there's some amazing tutorials. For a standard editor, it does some really great things, and the integration that happens within Final Cut is, I think, probably second to none. The only problem is, if you want to go to After Effects or some of those other things, it's a standard After Effects workflow. I mean, you'd work with it similar to the way that you'd work with it in Final Cut 7.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Sam Messman. I thought long and hard trying to get someone here to talk about Final Cut 10, and found the right person, so thank you, Sam.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
I also have some water and chocolate for Sam.
Ah,
So thank you very much. Yeah.
Excellent.